Good night to everybody gathered here at Quakers Road. I especially want to welcome those faces who I can identify as being supporters of the Democratic Labour Party. There are more and more of them coming out to hear what the Barbados Labour Party is saying. And we welcome them because they have begun to realize that they have been following a party blindly and that they have been following a blind party. So let me welcome all of you, B's and D's. Now you may be wondering why we are here in Quakers Road tonight. Why are we here? Today is the 23rd of February 2014, a year and 2 days since this country was once again plunged into a path of destruction. Cynthia is right. Normally the Dems will be celebrating a first anniversary and they'd be having all kinds of food and so on. The only thing that they've been able to do is to put a little page up, I hear, on the website. But as I was recognizing that today is Sunday, it occurred to me that in the Anglican community, they normally count off the Sundays as a Sunday after some event. So you talk about the first Sunday after Christmas, after the Epiphany, and the third Sunday after this. For the rest of our life as a nation, the fourth Sunday in February will be known as the first Sunday after the Great Betrayal. It now has a new name, the first Sunday after the Great Betrayal. Whenever the fourth Sunday in February comes along, remember that on the 21st of February 2013, the people of this country were betrayed. Now, you know, people say history repeats itself. And normally, sensible people would know how to prevent history from repeating itself in the bad ways. But the Dems are perfectly capable of picking out all of the bad, wicked, and dreadful things that have happened to this country before and repeating it. I happen to come from a family of churchgoers, and I want to identify which one, but one of them pointed out to me as I was preparing to come here today, verse 1 of chapter 1 of the book of Lamentations. Now, the book of Lamentations, I am told, is a poem where people are lamenting the fall of the city of Jerusalem. And verse 1 of chapter 1 says, "How deserted lies the city once so full of people. How like a widow is she who was once a queen among nations. She was a queen among the provinces, but has now become a forced laborer." And tonight is not a night for sermonizing. But I am sure that the lament found in Lamentations verse 1 strikes a chord with everybody in hearing distance. Because you begin to understand that Barbadians are once more lamenting how great a country they used to live in, but look at how far she has fallen. We used to be a queen among nations, but we have now become a forced laborer to international agencies like the IMF. It would do the Democratic Labour Party well to remember the standing that this country had internationally when Owen Arthur reluctantly handed over the reins of government to them in 2008. We were the gem of the Caribbean, not just in the song, not just that song, but we were truly the gem of the Caribbean. We represented a country that others in the Caribbean wanted to follow. But now, St. Vincent, that used to look to us for leadership, is way ahead of us. And Dominica, that used to follow behind, is also no way ahead of us. So we who used to be a queen among nations, a proud country, are now a country that is sorrowing to see the state that we are in. There was a time when Barbados had 6% unemployment, and I understand it is up to 14%. There was a time when our economy was booming, and now you know that it is not. So as we gather at this crossroad, I want you to ask yourself, how long? How long? How long must we as a people sit and spectate when our country spirals downward, downward, downward? How long must we as a country accept mediocrity among our political leaders who govern us? For how long must the public servants of Barbados wake up, put on clothes, and go to work, not knowing if that evening they will hear, "Don't come back tomorrow"? How long must those hardworking public servants sit and labor under a cloud, wondering who will be next? For how long will the Frandell Stewart administration continue to put Barbados in the kind of chaotic state we are in, while out of the Prime Minister's office you only hear a deafening silence? For how long must we endure ministers of the Crown saying that temporary workers were sent home so that they could find permanent work? But we have a man named Peter Phillips who has a response for him. Have you ever heard, the internet is a bad thing because it allows every silly comment made by certain individuals to not only go from St. Lucie to St. Peter down to Christchurch. All over the world where people speak and understand English, our minister is now on record as saying that they sent home the temporary people so that they could find permanent work. Now, I do not know if he did not notice that companies are shutting down in Barbados every day. Business enterprises have been sending home people. So when he says he sends home temporary people so that they could find permanent work doing what? Permanent work where and with whom? For how long must we as a country stand as if we have no backbone and listen to empty promise after empty promise from a minister of finance to a minister of tourism to a minister of labor and now to a minister of agriculture? And so the theme of our gathering tonight, enough is enough, explains to you exactly why we are here. We are here to send a message to the Democratic Labour Party that a year and 2 days into this disastrous administration, Barbados and Barbadians have hit a brick wall, and enough is enough. Enough is enough. We can try to work out how we intend to convey that message, whether it is by marching or by protest. But what is important is that the authorities must learn first to listen to the people that they committed themselves to serving. When they came to government in 2008, they said that they were coming on a platform of openness, that they wanted a participatory democracy, that they wanted to hear what the people of Barbados had to say. Well, I want you, Frandell Stewart, and I want Richard Seeley, the MP for this area, to begin to show that you are willing to listen to what Barbadians have to say, because with one voice from tonight, we are shouting out, enough is enough. Say it with me. Enough is enough. Enough suffering is enough suffering. Enough starvation is too much starvation. The pain and the deprivation that we are beginning to feel again, we have to say enough is enough. I began by saying that history repeats itself. It should shame the members of the Democratic Labour Party that a former Prime Minister, Sir Lloyd Erskine Sandiford, could ask them that, you heard it, you read it, you saw it, how did you get back there? I believe when Sir Lloyd mouthed those words, he was saying, well, good Lord, you ain't learned nothing from what I had to go through. You didn't learn anything from the punishment that the people of Barbados inflicted on the BLP in 94 and in 99. Did you not learn from the mistakes that we made when we had the great back raise in the 80s? But the Dems, I said, are perfectly capable of picking out every bad thing and doing it over and over again. You would almost think, my friends, that they're beginning to do this thing for fun. They sent home thousands of workers in the 90s, and they cut the pay of thousands and thousands of public servants. And you would have thought that they would not want to go back there again. But they dare to tell the Barbados Labour Party that it is we, it is us, who, because we passed legislation to prevent the government from ever cutting public service salaries, it is the Barbados Labour Party that is causing the 3,000 people to go home. I've never heard anything so absurd. But what it tells you is this, that if we had not passed that constitutional amendment back in 1994, all now the workers of Barbados would be facing a 10 or a 12 or a 15% cut, simply because the Dems do not learn from the mistakes. They have the gall to tell us that they were actually thinking about it. Thinking about it. There are 25,000 public servants who go to work hard every day with mortgages to pay, and the taxation in Barbados is killing them. Practically every 6 months since the Democratic Labour Party came into power in 2008, they have increased the tax burden on Barbadians. Month after month, more tax, more tax, more tax. We are paying more taxes now to the government of Barbados than perhaps at any time in our history. There's been a vicious wage freeze. You have less money to spend. And they could actually let you know that they were seriously thinking about another 10 or 12 or 15% cut. In some places, they say that it might even have gone as high as a 30% cut. I think the problem is that the people who Barbadians elected to run this country, they had a manifesto, but they didn't have a roadmap. You know, anybody who used to play music would know that you have a musical score, and that musical score tells you the notes to play and the words to sing. But if the song that you're singing does not match the musical score that is on the table, then you will have confusion. And does this situation with David Eswick not tell you that some of them have one set of sheet music and another set have another set of sheet music? But there are some similarities that I want you to think about. In 2008, the Dems won the election. Taxation increased. They start to send home people. Investors lost confidence in Barbados. Projects stalled, couldn't get off the ground. And we had to endure that for 5 whole years. In fact, they even had no mercy. Frondell Stewart carried down to the wire. We had to endure that for 5 years. In those 5 years, I had the Eager 11, a group of people who really didn't want to see Frondell Stewart. In those 5 years, you had a battle between Chris Sinclair and David Eswick. I don't know if you remember it, but I remember it well. David Eswick seems to fight with a lot of people. And he had a fight, an ongoing fight, with Chris Sinclair. And that ongoing fight with Chris Sinclair culminated in a famous letter that David Eswick sent to the staff of the Barbados Water Authority, telling the staff, I forbid you from going to any meetings with that man named Chris Sinclair, the Minister of Finance. That was the fight before the last election. History repeats itself. Remember, I said taxation, people sent home, confidence lost, Barbados in debt, and a fight between Sinclair and Eswick. So we now in another 5-year term. And in the first year, we go through it. People sent home, another fight between Eswick and Chris Sinclair. Huh? I mean, we are now, it seems as though the Democratic Labour Party administration wants to shoot Barbados in its proverbial foot. I didn't say anything about Eswick. I said the Democratic Labour Party. The Democratic Labour Party wants to shoot Barbados in its proverbial foot. Now, nothing about what we're going through could be lost on them. I honestly believe that at heart they're human beings, and that somewhere deep inside them must understand that it is wrong to make people suffer. And it is for that reason that I have great difficulty trying to understand their motivation. And while, you know, whatever may be said about Eswick, and there may be many things said about Eswick, at least he has the guts to come out and admit that the things that they were doing were wrong. And that is where you start, by admitting that the things that they did during the first term, even though he supported them every step of the way, he has reached the point where he admits that they were wrong. He has had his Damascus moment. Like Saul on the road to Damascus, he is now accepting that he was wrong. And perhaps this is the beginning of his own conversion. I don't know if conversion to the bees or conversion to be an independent, but I believe that his conversion has begun. But there are many of them whose blind allegiance to the Democratic Labour Party, and who seem to have one motive before them, and that is that of securing a full pension, who are unprepared to speak out and say that the road that we have put, that they have put the country on, is the wrong road. So I ask you again, how long? Are we going to have to endure another 4 years of this in the idle hope that the projects that they keep promising will somehow miraculously get off the ground? For how many years have you heard the Four Seasons going to start next month? How many times have you heard that? In December, the very minister who represents this constituency said in a meeting abroad, Four Seasons going to start in January. Pickering going to start. This going to start. Everything is going to start. While the country stalls. How long? A year on, we have an opportunity to assess the Democratic Labour Party's report card. And if you look on the Democratic Labour Party website, sometimes I am forced to look at unpleasant things. I am forced to look at unpleasant things. You would look and you would see that a year in, they're boasting about having done wonderful things in this country. The only problem is that they have been unable to name them. They talk about passing legislation in Parliament, the Electric Light and Power Act. I have not noticed that Light and Power producing electricity any differently. I have not noticed that the price of electricity has been going down. In fact, you know that every time you go in the gas station, the gas prices inching up and creeping up and inching up. So they're boasting about legislation that has had no impact. They boast about a white paper on aging, but the very old people that they're talking about protecting, they are destroying the safety net that they have. So when we look at the DLP report card, I want you, like me, to put a big F on it. F is for Frondel, yes, but F is also for failure. 1 year in. And if you fail so early in your term, why should we have the slightest bit of confidence that we can expect better from you over the next 6 months or over the next 2 years? The truth is, the great betrayal took place in January because a large number of Barbadians were fooled. The Dems had a failing report card then too. That first term of the Democratic Labour Party, 2 prime ministers, 2 attorneys general, a whole set of ministers, that first term was a remarkable failure. But somehow they managed to convince Barbadians in the majority to give them another chance. Well, we are now a year and 2 days in, and they have failed in this year, and failure is again on the horizon. I am not going on that journey with them, because the Barbados that I know, we used to aim for gold. The Barbados that you and I know was a Barbados that was intent on succeeding, not on surviving. The Barbados that you and I know never used to satisfy itself with survival. That was not in our DNA. We were not about the business of surviving. For 14 years under Owen Arthur, we were about the business of excellence. And we achieved it. We achieved it. But this goes to teach us all a good lesson. In the twinkling of an eye, it could all vanish. And we are approaching that vanishing point. I do not believe that they understood what they did when they insisted that university students will have to pay university fees. You know, there are countries all over the world that stopped investing in education because it was cheaper to do so. And within a decade of reducing their investment in education, those countries stopped being competitive. I am not an economist. I read a little bit on matters that are normally outside of my reach. But I read an interesting article and it talked about exactly that in Germany. They began to reduce the amount of money that government was putting into education, and in under a decade, they were uncompetitive. Now tell me how it is possible for an administration to say that Barbados must become more competitive in order to make our way into the future, when the very thing that makes us competitive is what you are snatching out of the grasp of our young men and women. How is that possible? I honestly do not think that they wake up every day and ask themselves, how can I make our fair land better? That is what we did when we were in government. Every day we asked ourselves, How can we make a better Barbados? And if the DLP MPs and ministers would ask themselves that question, I believe that they would come to a new realization of what their role is. Their role is to make lives better. As Onafi used to say, to stop poor people from being poor. But that's not what is happening. Poor people are being made to become even poorer, and our lives, instead of getting better, have taken a sudden and disastrous turn for the worse. How long? Too long. The Dems have been in power for 6 years too long. The Dems have been in power in this term for 1 year and 2 days too long. We can't change the history. We lost the election. We can't unring that bell. We can't turn back the hands of time. I wish we could, but we can't. But what is ahead of us? What is ahead of us is worse than the last 6 years have been. And my understanding is that what the Dems are doing to us now is only the tip of the iceberg. So we have to choose. None of us on the Barbados Labour Party are interested in overthrowing any government. And you know, it is a shameful thing that we have come to the point that we've come to. The Dems wanted to, in fact, they ran in 2008 on listening to people, and people should have a voice. But yet still when Dr. Bell said that the government should be removed, all of a sudden people start saying, man, that's seditious, yeah. I feel he committed a criminal offense. Issues arise in Parliament, and me, Kerry Simmons, and Mayor Motley get questioned by the police. Everything that you do now that represents a criticism of the Democratic Labour Party, you are likely to find somebody knocking at your door to question your right to do so. But I want to say here, and they can send whoever they want, that the time has come for Owen Arthur, Mayor Motley, Dale Marshall, George Payne, all of us, to make our way back into Parliament as a government, and that can only happen when Frondell and Richard Seeley and Ronald Jones and Chris Sinclair make their way out. If you want to call that a call for their removal, well, so be it. I'm not interested in breaking any law. But you know, if a man is mashing my foot, I have a right to tell you, Skipper, you gotta ease off. You gotta ease off. And we don't have the luxury. We don't have the luxury of waiting another 4 years. And I want Frondell Stewart to do the right thing. If you are interested, Frondell, in listening to the people of Barbados, you need to hear their cries. And one of those cries is that the time has come for you, good sir, to leave Elaro Court and go back to your house in St. Philip and carry Lashley and all of them with you. Good night and God bless.